Well, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Bridges Conversations. My name is Steve Gibbons. I'm the Executive Director of the Bridges Foundation in St. Louis. We offer the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola in everyday life. This is a 9-month program that runs from about September through May. And if you want more information about that, you can reach out to us really anytime. But here is our website information, and you can check that out. And if you're interested, and we'll be happy to talk to you. What we've been doing in these conversations is just having short conversations with members of our community who have something to share. And so today, and by the way, if you have questions as we go, just leave them in the comment section here on Facebook, and we'll be watching for those. If you have questions you want to ask Marian after you listen to her speak a little bit. So we'll be here for about 20 minutes or so. And our topic today is making good decisions and making decisions that are for the greater good. And this is something we learn in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. So today we have Marian Love with us. Good afternoon, Marian.
Hi, Steve.
Good to see you, as always. Marian is a prayer companion, meaning she's one of the people that leads others through these exercises. And she's also the person within our organization that trains other people to become prayer companions. But today we're going to be talking about this idea of discernment and making good choices. So to begin, Marian, could you just begin by telling us a little about yourself and how you made your way to the spiritual exercises?
Sure.
And Bridges.
Sure. I'm married, have 2 grown sons and 8 grandchildren. My first career was as a nurse, and I had the privilege of working for the Jesuit infirmary in Jesuit Hall for several years. And that's what drew me to this spirituality. I noticed in those men that as their bodies were diminishing, moving out of their ministries, that their spirituality seemed to really come forth in a way that I hadn't expected. It was really strong. And so that led me to find out about the spirituality and the spiritual exercises. So I received the spiritual exercises shortly after that. I was intrigued because I had heard it helps with discernment. And at the time I was discerning whether to leave nursing and prepare for ministry. And so that my first encounter with the spiritual exercises helped me to make that decision to do that.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I think, a lot of people, even if they have not experienced the spiritual exercises in full, but maybe they've been on a retreat where they've had, or maybe they've done a little bit of reading about some aspects of Ignatian spirituality. They probably have heard that it is a good way to contemplatively reach decisions and prayerfully reach decisions. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that built into this from the very beginning? And what do we learn from Ignatius about making decisions?
Yeah, well, I believe that it's Ignatius' greatest gift to the church, and that is paying attention to our interior moods and feelings, and then making distinctions between, what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling, and is that coming from God or is that coming from some other source? Now, Ignatius found this to be true way back in the beginning of his conversion, before he had made the decision to follow Christ. And he used that method of paying attention to his feelings as he made that decision. That was really important. So it seems surprising that we would trust our feelings, because many of us have been grown up not to trust them, to repress them as, maybe being fickle or not true. But I have found, as others have found, that really being attentive to what's going on inside of us is important in terms of following God or following the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And I think that leads to kind of an obvious question, which is how do we know? How do we know if something is coming to us from God or whether it's coming from some other place? We may have these various feelings or these movements within us, but what tools are there, or how do we set about discerning? Really figuring out what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of questions. Am I following the Holy Spirit or some other movement? Or am I being drawn more closely to follow Christ? Or am I moving away from that? So it's like, is what I am feeling pulling me towards or away from God? And we know that by our responses. So Ignatius, lined out everything from his own prayer to help guide us. And he says that we need to look at our responses to our interior movements as to whether we're growing more in faith, hope, and love, or if that seems to be diminishing in our life, our ability to love or to trust. And usually, most of the time, we can see that by what we're feeling. But if we aren't taught to recognize what we're feeling, we just keep moving on and don't consider that to be important. So, the Holy Spirit is always drawing us towards more love, deeper relationship with God, ourselves, and others. And, other spirits, whether it's something, an external influence, an interior influence, it could be an old habit, an old tape, or it could be Satan, trying to trip us up and keep us from following God. That's a very real thing in the spiritual life. And I think I realized that more deeply through the spiritual exercises.
Right. I think what you alluded to here is, if we don't intentionally make time for doing this, it's just going to skip right by us, right? And so last month, or actually just a couple of weeks ago, we talked to Father Mark McKenzie about the examen prayer. So can you talk a little bit about how the examen, which is kind of a daily taking stock of what's going on in our lives, how does that play into making these bigger decisions?
Well, the examen is really our practice ground for learning to understand how the Spirit moves in us and how other spirits do affect our choices and decisions. And it's a way of looking back at your day as to what were our strongest feelings of that day, and then praying not just about those feelings, but the impact that they had on us. And that's where we'll see, where those feelings of the day were taking me. How did I respond to that interior feeling that was going on in me? Someone's comment sent me into a, negative spirit about myself. Well, that would not be from God. Because again, God is always wanting us to grow in our belovedness and our giftedness and our uniqueness, and would not want to discourage us.
Right. So is keeping a journal, can that be a helpful tool in the course of all this, so that you have something to kind of refer back to? Or
Oh yeah, I encourage people, even if they're not journalers, that if they want to pay attention to their feelings, pray the examen, to at least make some note, try to name the feeling or name the impact of a situation. Maybe an experience from my day was that I felt deeply affirmed. Well, just write that down, affirmed. But maybe I felt that my feelings from some conversation, it took me to a place of not feeling very good about myself. So to write that down. And over time, we see patterns. But what we do with the examen is, take that into conversation with Jesus, and he'll talk to us about the impact and if it has a deeper meaning or some insight about it, but not in a way that is, what do I want to say, discouraging or judgmental, but in a way that is saying, well, now that you know this, now that you're more aware of this, then how might that affect going forward?
Yeah.
So,
we actually have a couple questions coming in, and let's take a couple of those. And then if there's anybody else out there that has a question, please feel free to do that. But I think so. Here's Sharon Tan, who's a member of our community, writing in saying, so we're talking about these kind of big feelings that move us away from God or toward God, but are there more neutral feelings? Are there feelings that are kind of harder to discern? And how do we get at those?
Well, I think that's a good question, Sharon. I think we're not always in a deep sense of feeling love from God. I don't think we could live with that intensity every day, or every moment. So sometimes we're neither in a very strongly felt influence from God or from other spirits, that we're just kind of going through our day. But I do believe that God is very much interested in our life and wants us to know that. And so it might seem like we're doing something very normal or something very neutral, like we're not praying in this moment, but I might be, working in my garden or playing with my grandkids or my kids or my dog. And if I notice how that feels inside of me, then I, want to explore that more and say, what spirit was I cooperating with there?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'll take just a moment for a little commercial right now to tell everybody our next Bridges Conversation will be on Friday, June 18th, and it'll be with Sharon Tan, who just asked that question. And Sharon went through the exercises a couple of years ago now as a Protestant, and that's not all that unusual. We're seeing more and more Protestants take this journey with us, but we're going to be talking specifically about her journey in June. So make a note. So we actually had another question here from Angela Pancella. It says that some of us may have difficulty naming our feelings. Any tips on navigating that? It's like, I'm feeling something, but I don't know what it is,
Yeah, I think many of us struggle with how to name it because we weren't encouraged to. But one of the things that I found very intriguing was to pay attention to where we might be feeling this in our body. If I'm feeling something in my gut, like a clenching, or in my heart, like an opening up, that's saying something to me. My body is trying to tell me that I'm experiencing something. And so for a person to try to name what that clenching feels like and how it makes them feel about themselves, I think that's really important in terms of discernment, or how that opened up heart might make us feel. That also says something important about what spirit might be influencing us, because we might be more outwardly focused towards other people rather than focused inward towards ourselves, which is another good way of being able to tell, if we're responding to God's spirit or another spirit, is if I'm self-absorbed, turned in on myself, it's usually not God. And if we're able to respond to others with generosity, then we have sort of forgotten about ourselves, and that's a good thing in those kind of moments. So that's from the Holy Spirit.
So what do we do? So we're taking all these things into prayer, and we're paying attention to our emotions and our feelings and how we're responding to the things in our lives. What happens when we find ourselves doing things that maybe aren't so healthy, that aren't leading us toward faith, hope, and love, but we're kind of being distracted? So how do we respond when that happens to us?
Yeah. Well, Ignatius has given us rules and guidelines about that. And again, they are very helpful. I appreciate how attentive he was to details. But he would say that if we're recognizing sort of a restlessness or dissonance in our spirit, and we recognize that that's probably not from God, if I would pay attention to more to where it's leading me, he would say that we should notice that and notice where it began. Like, what started that all? We might just even notice a shift in our mood. So noticing is really important. And naming it is important, the impact. And then he would say, if we feel like we are in this place of moving away from God or the truth or from hope, to act against it. Act as if I were hopeful, or reach out to someone who might be lonely, to do something to steer us away from that direction. Ignatius would also say persevere in prayer, because this kind of situation, Ignatius called it desolation, that it doesn't last forever. It too passes. So persevere in prayer, trusting that God is always with us, whether we're in consolation, desolation, neutral. The Holy Spirit doesn't sit on the sidelines. It's always in there with us, trying to get our attention. He would also recommend that we check our motivations for what we might be doing. There might be something off there, that maybe our ego is in the way. Maybe it's unresolved hurt, that's causing this. So Ignatius would, say, pay attention to that. That's important. And then choose to ask the Holy Spirit for help. Say, what is going on here? What can I do? And in some ways, we have already responded to the Holy Spirit. Because when we make that choice to turn against this, that's also indicative of responding to the Holy Spirit. We don't do that on our own.
And I've heard you talk before about when we're trying to reach a decision, that we may come to a point where we just we know it's right, and there's a felt knowing about what is right. Can you talk a little bit more about this idea of a felt knowing?
Sure. So it might be, that we're considering a new position, a new location, leaving a group, or, something like that, or making a phone call, writing an email. And I might have this really strong sense that this is the right thing. And we can trust that, but Ignatius recommends that we also run it by someone. Ask a friend, what would they say to us? What would we say to a friend in a similar situation? In bigger decisions, he might, well, anyway, I'm getting farther ahead than the question there, I think.
Yeah, all right.
But a felt knowing is that strong rightness in your gut, that it just is right. And if we have a history of recognizing God moving in us, it's going to feel the same. We're going to recognize that and to trust that.
Part of our topic for today was this idea of the greater good, of making a decision that is far, in the end, it's for the greater good. So can you address that a little bit? And then I got one more question from someone, or from Sharon again, actually. So
okay, sure. Well, the greater good would be, what is the greater good for others? What, and if I'm making a decision, where would the greatest good lie? Or if I wanted to ask it a different way, what would be the most loving decision in this situation?
Mm.
So again, it's like, how can I respond in love to this situation, and what is it calling me to? And sometimes it's not so much what should I do, but who do I want to be? And who is God calling me to be in this situation?
Mm.
And then when we're, turned more towards God, it's like we can then more clearly choose what might be the greater good. And sometimes the greater good is in us. I made a decision myself that way, a pretty big decision, that I had to wrestle with that, because it was obvious that it would create a greater good in myself and also the people that I would be serving, but it felt selfish. And I had to recognize that as, some old tape, and also, the other spirit, Satan trying to get me to say, oh, that's selfish. You can't do that. That's a selfish thing. Well, you see, then I'm not free to decide. So I had to recognize those alternate feelings as well as being drawn towards this. And I think by paying attention, I could see that I could see the bigger picture, and so that really helped me.
Let's take one more question. Again, a good follow-up from Sharon to what you were just saying, I think, and that is, what if we're at a place in our lives where we have to make a decision, this job or that job, whatever it is, this relationship or not. What do we do if we haven't really reached that stage of that felt knowing, and yet we have to make a decision?
Well, Ignatius had that type of experience as well. And that if we don't know, let's say we might be feeling equal about the two choices, to what he might call, or we might call today, prey dreaming, to try each one on and imagine living it for a week and see how it feels. And Ignatius would have us pay attention to which of those choices continues to draw me over a longer period of time than the other. They might both draw me initially, but if I've kind of tried them both on, then I listen and pray with what I'm feeling about each one. And so I usually say, well, whatever is the strongest, the longest, would fit that situation. Or we can make pro and con lists, reasons why to say yes or no to one choice, and the same for the other. And it's not so much how long the lists are, but which thing on which list is the most compelling, like the deepest resonance in me, or the greater good, or the most loving, and to try to go with our intellect as well as our feelings in looking at all this data we have in front of us.
All right. That sounds like maybe a good place to begin to wrap it up here. We thank you for being here today and for joining this conversation. Just a reminder, we're here again on Friday, June 18th with Sharon Tan to discuss her journey to and through the spiritual exercises. Also, a reminder that if you want more information about what we do at Bridges, to visit our website. Our retreat starts every year in September, but we have information sessions at various locations all during the summer. So if you check out our website and look for the information sessions, that'll tell you when some of those are coming up. So please check that out if what you're hearing is new to you and sounds appealing. Reach out to us via our website. Marian, any closing shots here? Anything you want to say?
Just pay attention. Pay attention. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who helps make this broadcast possible. Matthew Freebersizer and Angela Pansella, and John Givens, and others who are working in the background to make sure everything goes well. So I think that is it for now. We'll see you in about a month. And thanks very much.
Okay.